I don't have to behave the way I feel. I still haven't mastered that. I'm still working on that, but that applies for not just me as the parent, but also our kid as well. Hey, kid, understand you're smoked. Understand you're probably frustrated. Understand your people budget is very low right now because of her personality. She's it's a for the disc model people. She's conscientious, dominant personality, and their people tolerance is a lot less than the influencers and the steady personalities. They have a lot higher bandwidth or more capacity for people interaction than a conscientious dominant personality. And so, hey, I appreciate that your people tank is low. I appreciate that. There's still we don't go below this level regardless of how tired you are. It's never appropriate to mistreat somebody regardless of how tired you are, right? And that goes for me too, right? There's sometimes, again, I want to throat punch people. I can't do that, right? That's not an appropriate response, right? But regardless of how tired I am or how much I disagree with them, or it's just not an appropriate response. Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you.
Hey Noble, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. It is so good to see you.
I am so glad you're here. I love that you have such a huge energy, such high energy whenever even before. So we chatted for like 5-10 minutes because we haven't caught up for a while. And the moment you come on Zoom, hey, like, how are you? What are you doing? And we chat about the family and things like that. And I love it. Like, you guys can't, well, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see, but those of you listening, you can't see the giant smile on my face because that's just the energy you bring. So thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, okay, for the people who don't know a little bit about you and your work, you have just come from Combat Cuddles, so you're going to have to explain to everyone what that is. And you're all things EQ, emotional intelligence, and that's the stuff that I love to talk about a lot. And I was also saying I haven't had too many people who, well, I haven't really had any. The podcast only started in November 2023. And so I haven't had anyone else who just does emotional intelligence on there. So I'm really looking forward to picking your brain and hearing your stories and things like that. Anyway, can you just describe to everyone what is Combat Cuddles?
Yeah, so it's so funny. I remember we came to speak a number of years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, to Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, and you guys call hugs cuddles, and I didn't know that. It was the funniest thing ever. So combat cuddles is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So my daughter's 16, and I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 8 years now. My daughter's been doing it for about 3 or 4 years, and it's my mental, emotional, physical, spiritual fitness program, part of my fitness program, because it's a great way to practice and work on your emotional health and emotional intelligence for sure.
Mm, that is so cool. Yeah, I know. Again, for those of you who are just listening on the podcast, if you haven't seen Noble yet, he's got, sorry, he's laughing. I can see him. Giant beard, like big, fit, strong dude, covered in tattoos. Like, can you please give us, this doesn't really fit with emotional intelligence. Give us a bit, and I know you're a West Point grad. Like, can you just give us a bit of your background, please, so everyone gets this picture of who you are whilst they're listening?
Sure, sure. So I went to college in the United States at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So it's a military school. It's a 4 year military school. Very, you can just YouTube it and you'll see some. It's very intense, very intense school, and you average 23 credit hours a semester, and a lot of smart people go there. I snuck in under the radar. So was in the military, used to jump out of airplanes in the 82nd Airborne Division to get to work. We jump out at about 1,000 feet. I was an infantry officer. I went to a school called Ranger School, which is another great spot to practice or reveal your emotional intelligence or lack thereof. You eat twice a day. You have 5 to 10 minutes to eat each meal, and you may sleep 1 to 3 hours a night. And you're moving, doing missions for 18 to 20 hours a day. So you are intentional food deprivation and sleep deprivation. And if you want to talk about revealing emotional states, it is it is no joke. Also a very intense experience. So I was in the military for a handful of years. And then after the military, I was in a business cult for 23 years. And because of my lack of emotional intelligence and lots of my emotional dysfunction, we ended up doing very, very well in that business cult because it was perfect for a guy who was emotionally needy, emotionally codependent, toxic positivity, people pleaser addiction, like just name the dysfunctions. And I had a great list of them. And again, in this toxic environment that was used a lot of manipulation and control and guilt and shame for their leadership principles. I did very, very well in that environment. And then and we spoke all over the world. Australia was one of them, Trinidad and Tobago, Canada. We spoke all over the world to thousands of people. And then about 5 to 10 years ago, I yelled at my wife 3 times in 3 weeks, and she said three things. Number one, don't ever do that again. Number two, you've never done that before, which means number three, you got more issues than Time Magazine. And I was like, oh, snap, babe, you're right. Went to therapy, and the therapist said, Noble, I want to introduce you to two revolutionary cutting edge concepts. And I'm like, I'm ready, boss. Give me the skinny. Well, give me the down low. And he said, feelings and emotions. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. never, never heard of those before. I wasn't issued those in the military. The Army didn't give me those. No idea what feelings and emotions are. He said, that's why we're talking. Got on an emotional fitness program. 2 years into that emotional fitness program, all these areas of my life started to transform for the better. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my finances, my fitness, my business. And I told my wife, like, babe, has this all been because I've been emotionally dysfunctional? And now I'm finally taking ownership of my emotions. So all these transformations and changes in a positive way are happening. I said, babe, I got to start a podcast, just sharing the junk in my trunk and all my lessons learned, because I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there. There's got to be other nobles out there like me. Hopefully I can catch them before their 40s so that they can start their emotional fitness program way earlier than I did, to save them many, many heartbreaks and disappointments and hurts and that kind of thing, and dysfunction. And so started the podcast called EQ Gangster. And then from that podcast and YouTube, it's on YouTube as well, EQ Gangster. One of my started to get a lot of people reach out and say, hey, Noble, do you have anything else? The podcast is great, the YouTube's great, but do you have any more training or skinny? Created an EQ 101 introduction and overview to emotional intelligence 12-week course. Had a group out. This is probably 4 years ago. 6 months later, I had one of those attendees attend that event, call me up and said, hey, Noble, I attended your 6 week or 8 week, 12-week course on emotional intelligence. I'm a CEO of a large company. Could you put together an emotional intelligent leadership coaching program for me and my top 9 executives? And I've said, absolutely. They've been a client of mine now for 4 years. And about 4 months after that, one of my other classmates from West Point called me up and said, hey, Noble, I just landed this contract with a $4 billion big giant construction company, but I got hired on as the COO of a completely different company. I can't fulfill that coaching contract. Can I sub you out to do some leadership coaching for me? And can you include your emotional intelligence stuff? I'm like, yeah, of course, bro. So I was doing stuff for me and stuff for him. His company's called Arrowhead Leadership. And now, so 4 years after working together with him, we are merging this year. We've merged our companies together. So now all our corporate stuff, or all our corporate companies that we're working with, are all under Arrowhead Leadership. And then all my, one-on-one little onesies and twosies and my YouTube and my podcast are still under EQ Gangster. So that's the latest and greatest. And we're, we've spoken to the military. We just did some speaking engagements at this organization called the Pentagon in the United States, which is a big military complex. We've done speaking engagements for kids. I just did a speaking engagement for 130 kids, so 65 kids, 130 people, 160 people, for 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds that are very involved in the Western rodeo stuff, horse roping, horse riding, horseback racing, all the rodeo activities. These kids are like hardcore into it, and they wanted some emotional intelligence, emotional health training, some resilience training. So anyway, a lot of God's opening up tons of doors, but that's the latest on Noble.
Holy moly. Okay. You just like packed everything in. I didn't know half of that stuff. I didn't know. Now you're merging your company. Like there's so much. By the way, we didn't touch on though your wife, Kathy, and her amazing podcast. Because I think everyone listening or watching, I think this is going to be something that you will probably want to jump on, regardless of the age of your kids. Can you tell us a bit about, is it Filter It Through a Brain Cell? Pretty sure that's it.
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. So it's called Filter It Through a Brain Cell. It is a podcast teaching kids and parents how to think critically. So many, now I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the United States, so many people, kids and adults, are allowing their emotions to drive their decision making and their interactions on social media. Social media, if you have not watched an amazing documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix, it is powerful and will absolutely blow your mind on the science behind social media. And it is intentionally to provoke and stir up our emotions. That's the whole point. So if you don't know how to manage, if you're not aware of your emotions, you don't know how to acknowledge, identify, or process or manage your emotions, and therefore don't know how to think critically, you will potentially wreck your life and potentially a lot of other lives and relationships because you don't know how to do that. So her podcast teaches logical fallacies, teaches critical thinking. It's a very, very powerful tool. And her podcast episodes are literally 5 to 10 minutes. Occasionally show up, they may go 15 minutes. She had me to do a couple of her episodes. They were longer because I'm long-winded. But she had my episodes that she had me on was, Noble, how should we think about our emotions? What's the emotionally healthy way to think about our emotions? And so anyway, her podcast is on fire.
Whoa. Okay. So everyone get on to that. I'm going to put all this stuff in the show notes, by the way, so you can all find it. I've written down myself The Social Dilemma, Netflix. I'm pretty sure I've heard of it. Haven't watched it though. And Filter It Through a Brain Cell is Kathy's podcast. Okay, so something you mentioned just before, Noble, I wanted to add my 2 cents, my experience, and it's around social media. So on Instagram, I'm posting a bit less than I used to, but I used to post like once or twice a day, and I would do reels, and it helped me to grow my network, I guess, grow my audience. And so I think at the moment there's about 160 something thousand people, on my Instagram, which, it means I'm sending my message out there and a lot of people are hearing it, which is good. I have to say it's good, but there are obviously some disadvantages or downsides. And one of them is, because it's on social media and because everyone's behind a screen, we can say what we like. People can say what they like and they don't realize, the impact. And there was one instance where this was several months ago, and I remember thinking, thank God I know about emotional intelligence. Otherwise, I would have shut down my account and I would have been a ball of like a mess on the floor, and I would have snapped back to this comment, and probably damaged my own brand and my reputation. It was a simple reel about, I think, allowing my kids to probably have their emotions and be really upset or angry about, a certain thing. I told a story of something that happened at home, and one person said, this, yeah, you let your kids have their emotions. Good on you. This is not this is you're raising school shooters. And I was like, what? And I was like, hang on. Like it blew me away for a second. I was like, where's that connection? Like, since when is the MO of a person who goes and does those things feeling nurtured and heard and seen and cared for, and like their emotions matter, and helping, they know how to process them, like you're saying. Anyway, so there's more examples, unfortunately, but that one, as you were sort of saying, it just stuck in my mind. I've had a lot of comments, and some of them, yeah, I think, thank goodness, I understand about my own emotional reaction and what that's bringing up for me and how to deal with it in the most productive, respectful, beneficial, like benefiting me way, but also noticing, other people have their emotions and their experience. It's just true for them as mine is for me, and I can't argue with that, but I can let it go, or I can do some real damage. So I'm glad you brought up that point. I just want to kind of add my 2 cents.
Well, and here's another a point with that too, Stephanie, is that so many people, because the majority of people have never been trained in how to acknowledge, identify, process, or manage their emotions. Many people, as we know, are emotional. Like me, I'll tell you, me 5 to 10 years ago, I was a 40-year-old emotional 5-year-old. And so when you hear a comment like that, for me, now I'll do, I've got a few filters that I'll go through, but one is there any truth? Because I don't want to be emotional in my response. So, okay, is there any truth in their perspective that I can learn, take, grow, use to build and better myself? But number two is, what is the emotional state of the person making the comment? Most of the time, I can, okay, they're if their comment is by default emotional, I know there's a good chance that they have potentially a lower EQ. If you don't know how to, again, control and manage your emotions in your social media engagements, that is just a clue to me, a sign their EQ is probably lower. So is it appropriate for me, now that I have a higher EQ, for me to get upset at an emotional 5-year-old? That's not appropriate for me. Why would I, if a 5-year-old kicked me in the shin, would I kick him back? Of course not. They're five. I don't, there's no need for a grown old dude to treat a 5-year-old the way a 5-year-old treats me. That's very, very emotionally immature. So I just want to remember, okay, that's their emotional state and their emotional age that they're probably working from, which is fine. I don't need to engage and come down and drop my EQ.
Oh my God, brilliant! I love how you described. If a 5-year-old kicked you in the shins, would you kick them back? Like you'd need to be take the high road, be the more emotionally mature, or just the more mature person. And that goes for emotionally charged situations as well. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so if my voice sounds a bit croaky, that's why. It made me actually think, Noble, I know you've got some stories and I want to hear them, because I know that I feel like those things really land with parents a lot. And something that just happened last night, I'm going to drop a story in. My 2 kids like, it was almost bedtime. So my kids are 7 and 10, and they were doing a bit of tit for tat, like, oh, you did it, oh, I can't, and then doing faces at each other. And it was just, that irritable kind of just before bedtime time of the day. And I could see, it was almost like I had zoomed out, like above myself and the kids and the situation. And I was looking at it, and don't get me wrong, I cannot always 100% of the time do this. Sometimes I'm like, guys, that's enough. Like sometimes I'm, human, but I could see what was happening. And I was like this zoomed out version of me looking at their, like, an emotional 7-year-old, an emotional 10-year-old. And I was like, I've got to be, I'm 37. So I've got to be like an emotionally mature 37-year-old, not like dip down to their level and just, um, yell and call the shots kind of thing. But it's really fascinating when we have a bit more of that self-awareness to know, okay, they're arguing back and forth, there's this disagreement, then like we need to bring in some kind of circuit breaker, or I need to, because they're just going back and forth at each other. And it's so like I was able to remain calm even at the end of a very long day. And this week that we're recording this, I have my parenting conference on, so lots of stuff is happening. And I was like, wow, like I just kind of reflected after that, and I was like, we eventually sorted it out and got them activities and set up before bed and stuff. But that could have gone very differently. And probably a few years ago, it would have. I would have been like, right, if you can't sort yourselves out, you're going to bed early. I don't care. Separate rooms, done. Like just to kind of nip it in the bud. You know what I mean?
So huge. That's excellent, excellent job to be able to have that awareness, especially in the moment. Here, so a thought that gave me that I think a lot of us. Well, I'll tell you, me personally, and this is one area I'm working on like real time. So something that I have been doing some research on and researching because it's affecting me personally is how tremendously my emotional intelligence is affected by my energy levels. So when my energy level goes down to no joke, being, the age I am now as an older dude, when my battery gets to 60% at 50, the ability for me to make consistent, wise, predictable, emotionally healthy decisions drops exponentially. The more fatigue, so the more fatigue enters my headspace and body space, the less effective I am at decision making. And so now I am super aware. I say I'm super aware. I'm growing my awareness around my energy levels because I know that if I again, if as soon as that battery starts hitting the 70%, 60%, God forbid it hits 50 to 40%, I have to get a power nap in like immediately. It's like the alarm bells go off and I need a 5 minute power nap, a 10 minute power, something. I need to stare at a wall. I need to get alone, something to dial to rest and recharge my batteries even a little bit to get back out into whatever I was doing. But if I allow, and here's the thing, that's especially true for our kids. I know this, and for 10 years, 12, 14 years, when our daughter is tired, I deal with our daughter very differently when I know she's tired versus when she's energetic. Not that I lower the standards when I know she's tired, but I increase the grace and the compassion the more tired she is. Now I'll still amor. I'm part Spanish, so I speak to her in Spanish. I'll say amor. I call her. That's what I call her. Amor means love, and I say amor. I said I appreciate that you're feeling smoked right now, that you're super tired. That's not the appropriate way to respond to your mother. So go ahead and make that right. Again, I appreciate that you're smoked. Listen, I'm tired too, so I appreciate that, and we'll let you hit the rack here as soon as possible. But let's make it right with mom here. What do you need to? How do you need to address mom? Hey, mom, sorry, I was short at you. I snapped at you. Okay, awesome, mom. Cool. Yep. Hey, hon, no sweat. Okay, got it. Okay, Almor. Now go ahead and hit your bedtime, right? So I want to give her lots of grace, but I'm not going to lower the standard and say, okay, yeah, you can treat mom poorly because you're tired. No, just like I can't treat you poorly because I'm tired. I'm smoked too, and I want to gorilla stomp you right now, but that's not appropriate, right? That's not appropriate. I don't. This is something my wife taught me years ago. I don't have to behave the way I feel. I don't have to behave the way I feel. I still haven't mastered that. I'm still working on that, but that applies for not just me as the parent, but also our kid as well. Hey, kid, understand you're smoked. Understand you're probably frustrated. Understand your people budget is very low right now because of her personality. She's it's a for the disc model people. She's conscientious, dominant personality, and their people tolerance is a lot less than the influencers and the steady personalities. They have a lot higher bandwidth or more capacity for people interaction than a conscientious dominant personality. And so, hey, I appreciate that your people tank is low. I appreciate that. There's still we don't go below this level regardless of how tired you are. It's never appropriate to mistreat somebody regardless of how tired you are, right? And that goes for me too, right? There's sometimes, again, I want to throat punch people. I can't do that, right? That's not an appropriate response, right? But regardless of how tired I am or how much I disagree with them, or it's just not an appropriate response, right? So and so in communicating this with my daughter, I have to model the behavior that I expect as well, right? So anyway, I just want to talk about that, just the energy levels based on your story there. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, whoa. So many golden nuggets. I remember when I think I had you on one of my summits last year, maybe, and you dropped the you don't have to behave the way you feel. And I remember the amount of parents who were watching and they watched your session in that summit last year, losing their minds because of how powerful and yet simple that was. Like, it's not easy to do, but it's really, really simple. Like, it is very powerful. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I love also that you were talking about the word that's coming to mind for here from what you were saying is making accommodations for kids when their tank is low or their energy levels are low. I, just like you, I would like my husband to be more tolerant and patient and compassionate when I'm at my limit or I've got nothing left, or I've got, I'm low on my budget, kind of thing. We talk about the spoons. I don't know if you've heard about the spoon theory. It's more around, I think, the physical disability community. If you guys look up spoons theory, I think the creator or the person who sort of, I want to, yes, created that idea or concept is Christine Miserandino, I want to say. She has lupus, and she was explaining she was explaining what it was like to have lupus to a friend, and she grabbed some spoons, I think at a cafe or something, and said it's like everyone starts with a certain amount of spoons in the day. That's how much energy they have, like, to get things done, to go to work, to cook dinner, or to make breakfast, or to do buttons on the shirt, and talk to people. And she said, some days, you might start with 20 spoons. Some days, on really bad days, I start with about 5 spoons, and that's what I have for the whole day. And I need to really be mindful about, okay, my fingers hurt today because of my lupus. What am I going to wear? Because I don't want to spend a whole spoon trying to get dressed and get out the door, and I haven't even had my breakfast. And then I've got to go to work, and then I've got to make dinner, and so on. So anyway, spoon theory, like that kind of concept came to mind, which I really love, because I talked to my husband about it, and we now can kind of I guess, like a seesaw is in my mind. We can kind of balance a little bit more if I say to him, like, I've got like 1 spoon. Can you please deal with the kids? And that's so much more respectful, but also I think beneficial in our relationship than me being like, can you get the kids? I've been at work all day. Like, all I'm asking is for you to put them in the bath, blah, 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 blah. And then it starts an argument. So yeah, I think you also said, Noble, if we need to be able to model emotional intelligence or emotional awareness and things like that to our kids, and we have to, what goes for our kids goes for us, and vice versa. I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Yes, but that's fire, which is one of the next points that I actually wanted to make is our kids. So here's a fire quote: "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say." Which is what every kid physically or subconsciously is telling their parents. What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. For example, I have somebody that I know who is he's a parent, has kids, and is a screamer, and 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 here's the irony: he will scream at his kids when his kids are screaming. And for me, it's like, dude, like, this is a no brainer. You 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 know why they're screaming, right? Like, you are modeling the behavior that they are doing. They learned how to do this from you. And he told me, a different conversation, that he had the same thing from his dad. His dad was a screamer. This stuff. So here's my question to you all. If you're listening, if you're watching, what is the emotional legacy you want to leave your family? What's the emotional legacy you want to leave your family? Here's an exercise I just did with my family last week. No, yes, last week. This weekend, I think. This was fire, or fuego for those who speak Spanish. What? Check this out. So I did this exercise with a client of mine, one of my corporate clients, and I had him do it. And I thought, oh, snap, this is fire. I need to do this exercise. So while my client was doing the exercise, I was doing this for myself. Here's the exercise. It's 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 tied to what is the emotional legacy you want to leave your family. So this is the exercise. I just posted this on my LinkedIn channel, on my LinkedIn profile too, on LinkedIn. Just posted it yesterday, I think. So culture, culture in the culture of a company is is directly affected by the emotional intelligence of the leaders in that company. And I say this on my podcast a lot. The emotional so emotionally healthy leaders create emotionally healthy cultures, which lead to maximized and optimized results, outcome, performance, and engagement. The same is true for families. Emotionally healthy parents create emotionally healthy cultures, which lead to maximized, optimized results, outcomes, performance, and engagement. Negative peer pressure is as strong as family identity is weak. Negative peer pressure is as strong as family identity is weak. The stronger the culture of a family, the better the decision making of the individuals in the family. So here's the assessment. I did this with my client, and I'm like, this is so dope. I got to do this for myself. And it freaked me out. So I said, okay, 5 minutes, bro. I'm going to shut off my camera. I'm going to shut off my mic. I want you to spend 5 minutes describing your actual family culture. Describe it. Don't analyze it. I don't want you to write down the culture that you want to have. I want the actual culture of your family, which takes self awareness and social awareness. And it takes a heck of a lot of honesty and vulnerability and courage to answer this question objectively. So as soon as I gave that exercise, I'm like, oh crap, I have to do this too. I've never done this before. I got to do this. So shut the camera off, set my watch alarm for 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, I had 32 descriptions of the culture of my family. 32. And then I had this terrifying wash over my body. It's terrifying. I'm like, wait a second. But what percentage of these are actually true versus what I want my family culture to be? So then I'm like, well, how do I check myself? I got to ask my wife and my 16-year-old daughter and our 18-year-old niece who's been staying with us for the past 4 weeks. It's like we've got our own consultant. So I'm like, this is going to be fire. So I came home and I said, all right, y'all. It was lunchtime. The kids were working on the ranch. They had lunch break. I said, okay, right now, put the pizza down real quick, put the chicken wings down, and grab your phones. And I want everyone, we're all going to take 5 minutes. I said, I just did this exercise, an hour ago. We're all going to do this. I want you to write down as many things as possible. Don't analyze it, just vomit for 5 minutes. I want you all to describe our family culture. And I was shaking in my boots on what I was going to get. How this was, you want to talk about an EQ assessment? You want to talk about an EQ like check? How, and I, this is my, like, how far off am I going to be from what my wife is going to write down, what my 6-year-old daughter is going to write down, and what my 8-year-old niece is going to write down? How far off am I? Or, God willing, how aligned am I? Is hopefully my goal, right? And so I videoed it. I said, okay, hit me, give it to me. Started with my niece, then I did my kid, 16-year-old kid, then my awesome wife. And thank God it was a monster victory. There were only a couple that I had not written down. They all made sense, and we were like completely aligned. And I was doing cheetah flips on how excited I was on the accuracy of how well we all described our family culture. Then the second exercise was, now we're going to take 5 minutes to describe the culture that we want.
Ooh.
So we just described the culture that we have, which is awesome. That's good. Excellent job. And I think we all were very accurate. Now I want us to take 5 minutes to describe the culture that we want. But I said, for you, daughter, and you, niece, I'm giving you a different spin. Since you guys are young ladies, young adults, y'all are, about to leave the house and go off and do your own things in your life that, with your strengths and passions and stuff. I want you two to write down, take 5 minutes, and I want you to write down the culture that you want when you have your own families.
Whoa.
It was fire, Stephanie. Fire.
Ah, you got it. That's got to be like the noble. You got to name that exercise because that is so powerful. I don't want to steal it, but oh man, that's good.
Yeah, use it. Are you kidding me? Use it.
So,
Absolutely.
so for people listening though, if they think, "Oh, I don't know if I'm ready to do that," or I don't know if I have the time, because that's a great exercise. I think for coaching, when we have a relationship with someone and we're ready to, and they want to dive deep, is there something that maybe like a summarized or I'm trying to get, what can people kind of walk away with and think, you know what, I could do that over dinner, or picking the kids up at school.
So, so, so here's some caveats, right? The caveat is, if you have little teeny kids, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to be tracking like a VCR and be able to actually answer that question with any kind of like, for legitimacy. So this is probably for older kids, teenagers, middle school, high school kids. Or I got a lady, she responded to me on Insta, not Instagram, on LinkedIn. She said that her kids are grown, but she's still going to do that, because that was my LinkedIn post. I'm like, if you do this with your family, I'd love to hear like how it went. Like, give me what did you learn about your family? What were your takeaways? How far off or close were your responses and stuff, right? And so, because it's such a fascinating exercise. And she's like, all my kids are grown, and I'm gonna still have them do this exercise, right? Which I think is fire. So here's the thing. So number one is it's for older kids. The second thing though is if you want to step your toe in the water, right, is just do the exercise yourself about your family. This because my client did it. My client, he and it was he's and it throat punched him, that exercise, like absolutely throat punched him. He's like, dude, this is not the culture that I want to have. He's like, so bro, I said, okay. I said, now, obviously, the point of this is not to make you feel bad and make you feel guilt and shame and condemnation. I said, because guilt, shame, condemnation, critique, and judgment all shut down an engine. They will shut down an engine that's trying to move forward. All of those, you put all those in an engine, that's like putting sugar in your gas tank. That's like putting dirt in your gas tank. That's like putting rocks and sand in your gas tank or in your oil, deal. Curiosity, grace, patience, discovery, growth is what you put into an engine to make the engine go and grow. So when you're doing this exercise, bro, this is where we're at on the map. Okay. Is it where you want to be on the map? No, it's not where I want to be on the map either, but it's where we're at on the map. Okay, cool. Now, at which we need to know. We need to know that. Pretending like we're in a different spot, pretending that you live in New Zealand, but you actually live in Australia, does not help you out if you're trying to get to New Zealand or if you're trying to get to America. Pretending that you're somewhere where you're not is not going to be helpful. So you got to know where you're at. So do an honest, objective assessment of where you're at on the map with grace, patience, curiosity, discovery, and growth in mind. Then you can do the next exercise of, okay, now what's the ideal culture that I want to have? And then I would take just one or two of those areas and build one or two action steps that you can apply or implement immediately to start working on that slow, intentional, deliberate culture change within your family.
Can you give us an example of one area and then one action step, or like let's make this practical? Like we're talking about culture and things like that. Yeah. What's an example?
I'll give you an example. So both my client and this other guy I was talking about, right? Anger is a part of their culture. It is an allowed, acceptable emotion in their family. Now, and anger is that should be an allowed, acceptable emotion. So I'm not saying not allow anger in your family because that's part of a human experience. It's the appropriate expression of anger. And both my client and this other family, they yell and scream. Neither family realizes the consequences on each other or guests who are around their family that experiences them yelling and screaming at each other. They have no concept that that is not normal and it's not healthy. But because they do it all the time, that's they think it's normal. And they're so it's so part of their culture, they don't even realize that other people are like, dude, do you not realize how you're yelling and screaming at each other is affecting not just your own family, but the entire environment around you, right? Okay, so that's the example. So one action step would be to bring awareness. So having my client do that exercise, he immediately said, dude, anger, the inappropriate expression of anger is a part of our culture, and I don't want it to be. We are a family of yellers. That's the one thing I want to start working on immediately. I want to start changing how I respond and how I react to my family because I've got to lead the way first. And I'm going to stop yelling and screaming. And instead of always bringing up the negative for my kids, this is another thing I told them in terms of our coaching session. I said, dude, Why don't you start to change behavior? Why don't you start affirming, finding and affirming positive stuff instead of always finding and affirming negative stuff, and see what that does to both your anger and to the behavior of your children.
Whoa, fire. Absolute fire. Uh I oh gosh, I have so much I could say, and I have so much so much praise for everything that you've shared. I really truly see you as like the one of the thought leaders and one of the magicians in the EQ space. I love how you're so real and you share so openly, and you've got so many stories. And you, every time I talk to you, whether it's on like this type of an interview, I've had you on my Facebook community a while ago, on the summits and the conferences, you're always sharing really powerful, practical things that we can actually do. Like, what can we actually implement to make a change today? I love that you can do that, and I love that you have your own language of like. I re- you were talking about, I think when you were talking about your daughter, and there are a couple of words there. You said when she was smoked, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that means I'm really tired. Like I had to translate. I was like, Noble. But yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. My pleasure. So thankful for you, Stephanie. Thank you for all that you do, just with in this whole space, right? With parents, adults, just you being such an amazing ambassador on emotional intelligence and emotional intelligent parenting, right? Which is your world. It just you are transforming generations, Stephanie, which is I mean, that's incredible. That's the significance, the fulfillment. I mean, that's generational impact. That's huge. That's tremendous. I'm
Ah,
blessed to know you.
thank you so much. That means a whole lot coming from you. Okay, so we talked about the fact that we don't have to behave the way we feel. We talked about we didn't talk like we didn't mention it too much, but boundaries you touched on, still having boundaries with your daughter, for example, even when she is smoked. um, that kind of two-way, what goes for us goes for our kids as well. And you know what? I was able to type this as you were talking. I sneakily wrote this down because I loved it. What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. Like that just blew my mind. I hope that blew did that blow anyone else's mind? Is there um any last message or anything that you want to share with parents, before you tell us remind us where people can find out more about you, where they can follow you, where they can reach out to you, where they can, talk to you and things like that?
So just the last thing is just encouragement that again, just remember for yourself, it's not productive or helpful to beat yourself up. Guilt, shame, condemnation, critique, and judgment are just not helpful growth tools. They're not helpful growth emotions. They're very, very powerful, very unhelpful in terms of growth. Try to develop a new emotional habit pattern, package of emotions when you're wanting to grow and change for behavior change, and have curiosity, a discovery mindset, growth, patience, and grace in order to develop more traction in your journey for growth and change and transformation, so that you and we can model the behavior regarding emotions, the thought process around emotions that we need to raise the next generation of world changers.
Whoa. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. Truly inspiring. And again, I have a giant grin on my face because I've loved so much of this conversation, every little ounce. I hope that everyone listening has taken away as much as I did, if not more. Thank you again, Noble. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, likewise. So I'd love to follow you guys, or you guys check me out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Noble Gibbons, NobleGibbens, and also on LinkedIn, NobleGibbens. Would love to, however I can help out you, your audience. Obviously, I'm here for you, Stephanie. Just very grateful for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.